so much about this surprised me. And I think that's also something that pushed me toward the internet, where it's like when I first started using my period app to track my fertility to try to get pregnant, like I became really kind of like nervous about if it would work, like really how easy or difficult it would be to become pregnant. And I got fixated on it in a way that like I wouldn't want to talk to my friends about, in the same way that like, you know, your friend who like is always talking to you about their diet or whatever, like it's so boring. Yeah. And it's like, well, I don't want to like align my actual identity with these thoughts, but they're still there. And so I ended up, you know, exploring these things that I was ashamed of or I didn't want to own in that forum instead.
I'm Miranda Rake.
And I'm Sarah Wheeler, and this is The Mother of It All, where we take on motherhood through the lens of culture and culture through the lens of motherhood.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, friend.
So you are still on spring break.
Yeah, it's the last weekday of spring break.
Right, but it's 9 days.
I put on
As
this
we all know,
lipstick
it's 5
to try to convince
days.
you that I didn't wake up 15 minutes ago. Yes, it's 9 days. Not that anyone's counting. We've actually had a pretty good time. I went to LA by myself before break, so for AWP, for the writers conference. So that was like gave me a little boost going into it.
So smart.
Then I released my husband to go. He went for a few days also to LA. It's very close. It's very fun. And then I took my kids to like my parents for a few days, and now we're just chilling. We're going to go see the Minecraft movie today. So
you survived your spring break and it went well. I survived
It's not over. I'm sorry. You can't do this but eulogy for my spring break when I'm still living it.
I guess I'm trying to get sympathy for my situation, which is a 4-day weekend immediately following spring break.
Yeah, that's just
on the end of that
abuse.
9 days, it was like, oh, and then I could not find anyone to help me on these 2 days. Like I texted people I haven't texted in a long time who have children that are like anywhere from 13 to 17. You know, I was just looking for anyone to hang out with my kids a little bit, to get a little bit done. Possibly some mental health care or something like that. And yeah, it was, so I ended up with I ran in to a 10-year-old, I think she's 10, who is like an older sister of one of the kids Griffin goes to school with. And I ran into her.
Be honest, you were stalking a 10-year-old.
No, well, I did. There were like light bulbs going off.
You were at the boba shop being like, hey kid, I got a $5 for you. All you got to do is watch Bluey with my kids for 90 minutes. What?
Yeah. So so she's grocery shopping by herself for her family's dinner. And I was like, okay,
these are the skills
so if you're
I
allowed
want
to do that,
in a 10-year-old that watches my kids.
Allowed to like babysit. And I didn't ask her. I like went to her mom first. And her mom was like, great. And of course, like her mom was also, because I was like, well, I could pick her up and I'll bring her back after. And her mom was like, no, she will ride her bike to your house.
I'm sorry to nitpick, but I just need to get a full picture of this scenario. You were at a grocery store.
Yeah.
And you saw a 10-year-old by themselves and you accosted them about babysitting?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I went to her mom, but I like mentally was like,
she wasn't there completely by herself. She was dispatched to go. Where'd you find the mom?
I texted her.
Oh, you know this person.
I do know. Yeah, I do know.
Okay. It all just got a lot more. I mean, well, I was kind of excited about you just like go, we're all trying to build community here. Catherine Goldstein, friend of the pod, reminds us that you have to talk to strangers to do it. I'm still proud of you. And a little less scared.
I just was really at that point of like, why not a fourth grader?
Okay, I have one more follow-up question. And then I just have comments about what a great idea this is. What, did you really see a 10-year-old shopping by themselves?
Yes. And she got everything on the list. And I said, and did you get a treat for yourself? She was like, no. Nope. And then she gave Griffin a penny. And then we shared our popcorn. And
was she a ghost from generations past?
Maybe.
This is exciting. I think that, I mean, obviously, no one among us would dispute that like kids are less independent these days for a variety of reasons. But I do think there are stories we tell ourselves that are like, half fact and half fiction. And it's interesting to be like, yeah, no, it's still, I do know parents who are like having their 10-year-old shop, and it's almost like whatever, seeing a unicorn in the wild, but it does exist. So it must be possible. Okay. No, it felt so the 10-year-old's going to babysit for you on your 4-day weekend.
She's coming tomorrow, or no, she's coming today for 2 hours.
What are you paying her?
I haven't decided that yet. I was thinking, so she's going to be here for 2 hours. I was thinking $30 for 2 hours.
For 2 hours? I think that's generous.
What's a lot of money for a 10-year-old?
Yeah, I think that's generous.
Okay. Because she has to ride her bike here. And then, so I'm trying to also cover her transportation time and a little bit of hassle time. I don't know. I have a 10-year-old too. She's like a parent helper. And I think I told her I gave her $5 an hour. Oh, and wow. Her parents were like, Layla's parents were like, that's plenty. Yeah. She's the oldest of 4 kids. She's she's like way more responsible than I am. She should be my project manager. Exactly. Yeah. She has more kids than we do.
Yeah, she's going to need a lot of therapy, but she could definitely entertain a 7-year-old for a few hours.
Well, it's like you get to this point after spring break and then the 4-day weekend. I'm definitely at the point of I don't care how much screen time. I don't care what happens at my home as long as I come home and my kids are, like ideally not bleeding. Like,
the blood has been stopped. Well, good luck with that.
Thank you.
I wish you the best. We'll report when school's back in session.
Yes. I hope you also get back to school soon.
Yeah, we're good. We're good. It's actually been fine. And I'm trying to like take the win where I can with parenting. I feel like when I have this tendency, like when things are hard, I can talk about it. I have like an easy groove to go to. But when things are going well, I feel, I don't know, maybe like I'm jinxing it, or I feel like it's kind of, I mean, the culture has definitely talked about this with motherhood. Like I can't, Alyssa Strauss wrote a beautiful piece about this, right? Like I can't tell people when it's good.
Yeah.
Because it's so hard for some people. But I also think then like my system never integrates that goodness, that like that's part of the story of parenting. So I just want to say on, to millions of listeners that I have been enjoying parenting with no childcare this week. Immediately I'm like, oh my God, they're going to take away what little childcare we have. They're going to use that to close public schools once and for all.
No, they'll do that anyway. So it's okay to talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah. I like my kids mostly this week. Yeah.
I think that's great. I love that. And that makes me feel happy. Like hearing you talk about it makes me feel like theoretically I could have enjoyed my spring break more, but
oh no, see, that's what I mean. Now are you like,
no, it's okay.
What's wrong with me that I didn't have a good spring break?
No. I just have
if
too many
only there were
things
someone to help us unpack these
right. Oh my gosh.
Themes of mothering in the digital age. Okay.
All right. Well, we're so excited about our guest. We're going to just like cut ourselves off, which is really hard for us to do. We love
mostly me
to chit chat. No. So today we have a very exciting guest. Amanda Hess is joining us. Amanda is a journalist who has covered internet culture for a long time and is currently a critic at large for the New York Times, where she covers the intersection of internet and pop culture. Her first book, Second Life, Having a Child in the Digital Age, comes out May 6th. It is fantastic. Sarah and I are really obsessed.
I read it on the beach. Like, that's nice. A cool nonfiction culture book.
It's a beach read.
Yes. It somehow is brilliant and a beach read.
So welcome, Amanda.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm gonna like send that to my publicist to cut that part.
I read it on the beach.
Yes, yeah,
Sarah Wheeler.
It's a beach read.
It's so beachy. I mean, It is blue. Like I feel like this blue color is kind of like that Vacationers book, like Emma Staub's book, like very like oceany colored.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even inside the book, it's just
So beachy.
It's so readable and delicious and well written. And
fantastic, and everyone should get it. So we're going to dig into this book, but first we always start, Amanda, by asking who is caring for your kids. So we are curious about Alma and Brayden, what they're up to right now.
Those are the pseudonyms that I use for my kids in my book. Alma is 4, and he is in a public pre-K program.
Ooh, well done, New York.
Yeah, well, right. Mayor de Blasio started this public pre-K program, and actually there's 3K too. But Eric Adams has been sort of trying to walk it back. So, but my child just happens to be the right age that we've benefited from that. And
no one is bribing Eric Adams to keep 3K open.
I know we need to get him some
Amanda.
Flights, some international flights.
Well.
Right. And my 2-year-old is in a daycare down the street.
Nice. I love one of the many things that made me laugh about your book was your decision to use Brayden as a pseudonym for your youngest child, because that was a name you would never name an actual child.
Yeah, although once I made that decision, I can see it now. I can see him as a Brayden. I feel like it fits him.
And did a lot of parents of Braydens reach? Oh, I guess once the book comes out,
I think
there's going to be a lot of Reddit threads about parents of Braydens.
I know.
Outraged.
I was. I read the audiobook recently, and that's just an experience of questioning why you wrote every single word the way that you did, and that was one where I was like, why did I needlessly offend this category of person who named their child Brayden?
Like a million.
I know it's
people.
a popular name. I chose it because it was quite popular.
I think the comedians would say, we can check. Is that a marginalized group? Not specifically, but also, it was so fucking funny. It's worth it.
Thank you.
If you're enjoying this episode of The Mother of It All, consider becoming a paid subscriber by going to motherofitall.substack.com, and you'll get monthly bonus episodes and more. If you can't spare $5 a month, it's free and makes a huge difference for us when you share, rate, and review us wherever you listen to podcasts. Visit our bookshop storefront by going to bookshop.org and searching for Mother of It All. You'll find all of the books we mention here, as well as our favorite motherhood books and general recommended reading. Now, back to our episode.
So, all right. So, Amanda, let's start at the beginning. You write that you get a positive pregnancy test. And pretty immediately you tell your Flow app, which is a period tracking app that I'm sure people are familiar with. That moment reminded me so much of the kind of strange limbo of those early weeks of pregnancy where, you're deep in isolation. A doctor won't see you yet. You're not supposed to tell people. And so, of course, you turn to this app and you give it what you call resigned consent to all of its creepy tracking and surveillance that that it's doing in exchange for being able to join this anonymous community of pregnant people. It sounds like a kind of chat room vibe. And so, because of course you're desperate to talk about your pregnancy. And so you write, I imagined my test's pink dye spreading across Instagram, Facebook, and Amazon. All around me, a techno corporate infrastructure was locking into place. More brands knew about my pregnancy than people did, and they all called me mama. And of course, it's via this data tracking app, and of course, they're selling your data to all of these advertisers. And you even quantify the value of your pregnancy in the online economy, about $95 per 1,000 people that I guess they would be able to reach. So this is all really relatable. And it's kind of despite the fact that you've been so critically engaged with internet culture your entire professional life, the minute you're pregnant, you're just in it. You're okay, take me away, internet. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the intersection of techno corporate infrastructures and motherhood. Like, why are we such easy marks?
Yeah. I mean,
Go for it, mama.
I told the internet before I told my husband because he was out of town for like a week, which is like something that once we had kids, like would never happen again, you know? But
it will. It gets better.
Maybe, right. Maybe when they get a little bit older. So, and the first thing I typed into Google, I like went back to my search history later to see it was what to do when you get pregnant. And so I think for me, even though I had been writing about internet culture for a long time and sort of like was able to hold it at a critical distance when I was writing about it, I didn't know anything about pregnancy or being a mom, except that I knew that I had to do a lot of stuff differently and the stakes were really high because there was like a human that was going to be growing inside of me. So yeah, I relied on the internet for information, but more than that, it was really like as if it were my pregnant friend. And the thing that Flo did when I activated pregnancy mode was like, when you're using a period app, the style of a period app is like, it's very like, know your body, like empower yourself with knowledge or whatever. And then once you activate pregnancy mode, it's like, build the optimal human. And it's a real vibe shift. And one of the things that Flo did when I activated pregnancy mode was start showing me a CGI image of what the zygote or fetus or whatever it was at whatever stage looked like, scare quotes, like looked like. And I became very attached to my like Tamagotchi fetus in there, even though it sounds like really stupid saying that because it wasn't like particularly realistic image.
But at that stage of pregnancy, you have like nothing to hold on to, right?
Yeah.
Like you're kind of in disbelief. You can't, you don't even have like, sonogram images yet. So that makes sense to me.
Yeah, you're so, it's something like I didn't tell anyone with both of my pregnancies for the first, however long you're supposed to wait. And then my second pregnancy was in COVID and then it was complicated like yours. And so I didn't tell for a very long time. And now I wonder if I were to have a third, which I won't, but like if I would just tell people right away, like if it would be better to just get it out there with humans in my life and be talking. And then if I lost the pregnancy, also share that grief with people close to me. I don't know.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, I also like had some complexities in my second pregnancy, and so I waited even longer that time. And I was huge the first time, and then the second time, I don't know if you experienced this, but like I was just like, I felt like I was immediately like obviously pregnant.
Yeah. You go from like you're like week 2,
like,
yeah. So I was
maternity
like
dresses,
actively hiding it, and I think there are at least for me there are so many good reasons to keep it like in the family for a while, but I also think that idea of maintaining privacy is what sort of like opened me up to this broader privacy violation of like just like putting everything in the internet instead, so that companies could market stuff to me.
Yeah, that's it. The way that you write about it really brings home how creepy it all truly is. And I feel like both Sarah and I have a lot of awareness, I think, of really how vulnerable new parents are. I mean, they're such a target for marketing and they don't know what's going on and they're just kind of exhausted and
right. They're trying to build the optimal human. Like you said, like that narrative really lends itself to purchasing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah.
also will say that, like, when I found out how much my pregnancy or my due date was worth, I was kind of disappointed because
yeah, the
I
same as
knew-
like CBD. See, people who use CBD for OCD. Was that right? It was like the same as that. And I was like, oh, that seems
boomers with
Wait,
a
explain the
erectile
internet
dysfunction.
to me, Amanda. Like, what does that mean that your birth was worth $95 per thousand?
Per thousand. So
yeah.
there are these data brokers who put together like a list of information and lists of people who fit particular qualities. And so you could buy a list of 1,000 people who are currently pregnant, and the list says it's like updated in real time. You can, in some cases, like choose by trimester. You can get their actual due date. Stuff that you might put into an app or into Baby List or whatever. And at least one of these lists that I found cost $1,000, or it was $95 per 1,000 people. And the due dates were like an extra $10 per 1,000.
It is so cheap. Yeah,
yeah, it's pretty cheap. I mean, at scale, I'm sure, I'm sure it's a hardship for them to buy so much data of so many pregnancies. But for me, I was like, wow, that's not worth that much.
Yeah, that's
on
rude.
A personal level. Yeah.
Well, I'm also curious, Amanda, about how the pandemic exacerbated the relationship between like motherhood and technology, because you gave birth, in this unusual time, right? And that was your first pregnancy. But in a way, the isolation of the pandemic and like the reliance on tech over humans kind of represented just where society was going, right? Like more digital, more individualistic, over-informed, but also somehow uninformed, which is kind of like a theme of your book. What do you think, like, we crossed this Rubicon since the pandemic? Do you think things were temporary?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. My first experience of pregnancy, and then, this became particularly salient, I think, when I had a newborn, was so isolated because my child was born, the first one in the fall of 2020. So it was like pre-vaccine. It was incredibly isolating, but I did come to understand that it was like a version of the isolation that a lot of people feel in that moment, where, in my case, we had very few people who were like actually ever coming in to the apartment. And so, my friends are so nice and brought us stuff and food and like dropped it off outside and everything like that. But you
sprayed
just
it down
have,
with Clorox.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But you just have a baby, and it's just, it's your responsibility to do that, to just take care of it, which is, remained true the second time post-vaccine, and there's so many life choices that I made that difficult. Like I moved away from my hometown. I moved to New York City, which is very expensive. It's expensive to even visit this place. Yeah. And that's on me. But, it's also like in my line of work, there are fewer and fewer places to work, and my job is in New York. Yeah. I did see it as this very kind of like intense distillation of something, like a broader trend that was happening.
Yeah. Well, that kind of, talking a little bit about staying with pregnancy, I think early in your pregnancy, it becomes complicated, your first pregnancy. And you write so well about your agonizing experiences with all of the diagnostic testing that you then have to go through, the FISH, FISH test, microarray, all of this genetic chromosomal like mapping. It was very familiar to me. I had that in my second pregnancy. And it was nice just to see it written down and interrogated, because it blindsides so many of us. And I feel like you really are in many ways in the book, and this is one way, one kind of obvious way, you're like circling and interrogating the concept of informed consent. And so I've thought a lot about that term in the context of these tests. after my own experience, I wrote a piece kind of pushing a little bit on prenatal testing and all of this information we get overwhelmed with sometimes when anything becomes at all suspicious. And I spoke for that piece to a bioethicist at Oxford who told me that essentially with genetic testing right now, informed consent is impossible, considering the rapid evolution and complexity of the testing, and then plus how little time patients actually get to spend with healthcare providers. So I think a lot of us, we think of ourselves, I'm 40. I was in my 30s when I had babies. I had gone to graduate school. I had a career. I thought of myself as a savvy consumer. And then I was just blindsided by things that were coming at me in pregnancy, and especially in what became a complicated pregnancy. So, I wonder how you feel about this tension between having the assumption that we engage with the world as informed individuals and the fact that informed consent is almost impossible in the context of pregnancy and early motherhood.
Yeah, I mean, I think even if you are like really read into like your friend's pregnancy or a family member's pregnancy, for example, the tests are changing so quickly that if you were to get pregnant like a year or two later, you would be given sort of like different options at different times.
Yeah. I had friends whose kid got tested ended up having a genetic disorder that like 6 months earlier they wouldn't have tested for.
Yeah. And the first thing I noticed when, so I had an ultrasound at like about 7 months in my pregnancy at a time when like me, naive me, I was like, all of the tests are over.
We're
like,
good.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where my mother-in-law says, you're just making eyelashes at that point.
Right. So funny.
Yeah.
I know. It's painstakingly
creepy.
putting
It's
them
the
on.
hair. The hair inside is really
totally. And all the apps are like, telling you exactly what it is. It's like so gross.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And your nails today.
the cheese stuff. Yeah. And the nails. Ugh.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yes.
But then I had an ultrasound that was abnormal, and that kicked off like this intense round of testing and then more imaging. I ended up having a fetal MRI, which is where they like try to get a picture of, your fetus's brain inside of you, which is quite difficult, I guess. And the first thing I noticed after this happened was that I was assigned a genetic counselor who worked for the LabCorp. And so it's like, this is a person who, she was very nice. And I'm sure that she takes her job very seriously and is like professional. But at the end of the day, like she works for the company that is going to be processing my tests. And so I had to wonder, like, does she want me to have as many tests as possible? Is she like advising me to, whether she sort of like understands this or not, to increase this company's bottom line. And I think even that insertion of doubt makes it sort of like difficult.
Yeah.
Because that doubt is like seeded again at every moment. And so even though I got such wonderful healthcare, I have like union healthcare at my job. That covered most of this stuff. My doctors were great. Like just becoming a subject of the medical system and having my child become a subject of the medical system before he was born was like, I don't like to overuse this word, but it was like traumatizing.
Yes.
And that's for like my doctors like did they perform their jobs perfectly. So that's under like ideal circumstances. So I think, every time, so the second time when I was back in pregnancy, even having undergone this, like I wasn't able to really like take any lessons from that, where I was still like kind of like obsessively searching for things. I wanted to know as much information as I could. Like I wanted I was like searching in, Google Scholar and in like PubMed and stuff like that. And I have access to all of these databases like through work. And even though, what was also happening was that like I was, just like increasing my anxiety as I was doing that. But I think anyone who's had any medical experience go awry in any way, like, understands that, like, it's so great to have, like, access to medical care if you have it. And it also, like, is horrible and it sucks.
Well, I think you could say the same for, like, information in a way. I mean, I really appreciate in your book how you introduce and kind of explore this tension that arises from the fact that we kind of treat doctors as gods, right? Like in Lenox Hill, the film that's shot in the hospital of the same name, where you end up giving birth, like, you talk about the doctors talking in this, like, secret language, but then more data in the hands of people doesn't necessarily resolve these problems, or it creates new ones. Like, even in your case, all of that data, if I'm tracking it properly, didn't actually accurately tell you what was going on with your kid.
Right.
And you ended up kind of only learning that once they were born. So it was kind of useless too, or like, is data, is more information what we need? And it doesn't, it doesn't stop in pregnancy. It's like, that's the beginning of it for parents.
Right.
It's interesting that what you mentioned too about the, I'm sure this was your experience too, when I went through the microarray process, like, the genetic counselor that I worked with was talking to me about chromosomal additions and deletions, and said, like, well, there's ones where we know what they mean, and then there's ones where we don't know what they mean. And you're like, okay, that was my nightmare. I was like, you're going to give me information and no one can tell me what this means.
Right. But you're saying that's better than not having it?
No, I'm saying that was
No, the doctor is. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. They might, they might find some genetic signal in your child that is never, like, expressed. Like, it's never expressed in any physical way. I think, the tricky thing is, like, you only want the good information that's helpful, but you don't know what that is. But I also found that, like, I think because there's so much silence and even shame around this stuff, I had never talked to anyone who had ever had, like, an abnormal test during pregnancy. I had friends who had, like, with the fetus, like, I had friends who had, like, preeclampsia and other pregnancy conditions, but I had never encountered, like, somebody who had a fetal condition before. And so I was like, it's just me. And what did I do, or what is it about me inherently that caused this to happen? And I felt like I had really messed up parenthood before it had even begun. And the place that I, like, got that out was online. And searching for conditions online, like, I think it's so outside of any human context. You find, like, a lot of, like, medical images. I found images from, like, GoFundMes where families were, like, trying to raise money for their children. And so you tend to see kids, like, in medical environments, like in hospitals. And so in my mind, I was like, my child will always be in a hospital. You know what I mean? Like, that's, like, their natural environment or whatever. And it's just so cleaved from, like, the human context of disability and the fact that, like, everyone is different and human difference is normal. And so I found that to be, like, a very profound experience.
Well, and you also tried to, like, you did use some of your technologies to, like, attempt to have human conversation in a way, right? Like, you had some of those, like, pregnant apps where you were attempting to, like, post about it, but that didn't go well either, it seemed like.
That, I'm curious about in my experience, I was in this Reddit, the bumpers, there's these, like, bumpers groups, and it was the pandemic. And so that was my village of being pregnant.
What does bumper mean?
Like, I think it's like you're pregnant.
I'm just thinking about bowling, when you're bad at bowling.
You have to show, okay, this is kind of, maybe Amanda probably knows, you have to show your ultrasound photo to get in, and it has to have a date stamp and a time stamp, because they have to know that because it's by month and year, and you get admitted based on that. Anyway, so I did that. But in that group, I could talk about my scary ultrasound. And the quick story is that they saw this thing on the ultrasound. My OB was like, babies who have this don't live. I was like, okay. So I go home and share about this. And she wanted me to wait to go through all this testing. And I was like, no, like I want to terminate. And she was trying to comfort me, being like, don't worry, we can terminate it up to 24 weeks. And I was like, oh my God,
Yeah,
like, do it now, you know? And so I went back to this bumpers group and wrote about this, and people were DMing me and sharing stories that actually really helped me get through that strange time. So there's a tension there between the bad and the good.
Right. It is a place where you can find people who have like discussed this, right? But I also found, like, when I searched my flow group for like fetal abnormality, birth defect, stuff like that, nothing came up, and it said like, please try searching for something else. And it's like, oh, I would love to. I would love to be searching for something like more normal than that. And I also found, like, I ended up going back and getting some editions of What to Expect When You're Expecting. And they do this thing where any complications are like at the end of the book, and they're kind of like in a special box. There's this like lined box around them and a warning that's like, if you have a typical pregnancy, like, don't read this section because it's just going to make you anxious. And so that framing too, I think, was like, oh, like my pregnancy is so abnormal, or it's so scary that it like scares other people to even think about having it. You know, which is like, I just felt I had such a different relationship with my child's condition, with disability, with the idea of my child, like when I was pregnant, and then immediately after he was born, it changed. And so I don't know. I mean, I don't know there's nobody who's going to be psychic and tell you exactly what your kid is going to be like. But I think there was such a simulated experience of like knowing something about my child. And then when he was born, I knew so much more, and it was such a different context.
Well, it also makes me think about, you brought up disability, and we've had conversations here with Jessica Slice, who wrote this fabulous book about being a disabled parent, and like, and one of the things that she talks about is how like there's a false binary between disabled and not. And all of these kind of the what to expect is maybe the analog version, but the apps do it too. Like all of these things perpetuate that for parents, right? That like there's two categories. One is in a tiny little black addendum box, right? And it's not disabled and disabled. But actually, that's not how life works. That's not how parenting works. Like it's not. It's a lot of times you're spending so much more time living and thinking in this kind of liminal space, and so it's not helpful. But I can see how the fear that it sows and then the comfort that it promises is attractive and lucrative, potentially.
Right.
Well, I was just thinking about, you cover internet culture, and I'm thinking about the speed, the pace of, I guess now a lot of conversations about AI, like just the pace of the internet and that whole culture, and the pace of genetic testing, also like the evolution of that is really more than anyone could keep up with. And so I think that some of that isolation, like it's hard to keep talking about it because we are constantly blindsided. There's this like blindsidedness, or I have felt that. And so like, I don't know, how we're supposed to, I guess there's no good or bad, but like, I don't want to like make a spoiler, but at the end of the book, you sort of seem to let go a little bit of this maybe like hyper engagement with like the work of parenting or the work of like growing and raising kids. Like not that you don't love your kids and you're not with them, but you sort of it feels like there's a little bit of a pulling back. I'm curious, you know, in the book you also examine millennial parenthood, this kind of hyper like optimization that we feel we need to do because of the economic environment we've been, you know, experienced in our adulthood. And I'm just curious kind of where you have landed with all of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think my kids have really helped me with that because they are like completely out of control. Like I don't control them in any way, and I don't know how to. And that can be very frustrating at times. But also, like fundamentally, like they're their own people, and like I, you know, can hope to like have a good relationship with them. But it's a relationship, you know, it's like a back and forth. But I definitely feel like I think going through this, I was really worried that I was going to have postpartum depression because I've had depression before in my life and because I was just like so anxious and depressed during pregnancy. And I feel like I was maybe experiencing instead a kind of like mania, honestly. Like I was just like so on and like happy. And I think part of it was just like the relief of the pregnancy being over and, you know, my child being there and realizing that like I was capable of taking care of him. But I think it also just like inoculated me against some of the parenting pitches, like where parents maybe after their child is born, that's when they're like first like going into this rabbit hole of like, well, how can I make sure that they, you know, their sensory development is as good as it could possibly be.
Yeah.
Where I'm just like, I actually don't feel like I have much control over this. You know?
Peaked early.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if that's like to my child's benefit or not, but tech. Yeah.
Yes, it is. It probably is.
Well, and you're very much not alone. I mean, another thing that I discovered in kind of interrogating my own experience with all this testing is that like as these tests become more sensitive and more whatever, we are many more pregnant people are going to get quote unquote, you know, abnormal results. Like it's not going to be, you know, it's going to be, I don't know, 50% of people, like you're going to get some bizarre little deletion or slight genetic thing, you know, and then no one will be able to tell you what to do with it in a lot of cases. So I think that anxiety around pregnancy is really going to increase. I mean, it's tracked in many ways now. Even if you don't do flow, like you're going to be very tracked in your medical care unless you're a free birther.
And even they like, you know, they'll get genetic tests in some cases. Yeah, I mean, one of the things I write about in the book is like the development of the NIPT, which at the time that I was pregnant the first time, it was recommended for women of a certain age. And then by that summer, it was recommended for like all pregnancies.
It's like a genetic test, like a test for genetic abnormality.
It's an early genetic screen. So it's not a diagnostic test, but it will screen you for, I'm sure that they're increasing like by the day, but a variety of chromosomal conditions. But because it's a screening test, it's, you know, far less precise than a diagnostic test. So you're getting like a lot of pregnancies that are screened into this like net of high risk, like you're high risk for this thing, right? Even though most of those people, their kids will not end up having the condition. And so I started to like think, you know, my NIPT was like completely normal because it wasn't testing for the condition that my son ended up having. But I ended up going back to these like forums where people were in that diagnostic zone where they were like between the screening test and the diagnostic test, and they were going to this Reddit forum that was dedicated to them. And I just became really interested in how this is changing like how we think about disability where there are so many people now who are having this like traumatic event in pregnancy that's just the suggestion that their child might have some kind of condition that they end up not having. And I don't know what to do with that, because ultimately, like, my son was diagnosed before he was born, and because that happened, I was able to give birth at a place where the doctors at the NICU were prepared for it. They were like briefed on it and knew the potential sort of like protocols that they would have to put into place when he was born. And I felt like profoundly reassured by that. And so I'm so happy that I had this testing and that it was, we were able to like figure it out before I gave birth. But it also has these, I think, social effects that I'm just interested in how they're kind of just changing how we think about our kids in general.
Absolutely. And what, and you know, you talked about control too.
Yeah, I think that kind of leads us to the free birthers, I think, which I want to get into, because you write about that. You cover this free birther movement in the book. It seems to be such an antithesis of the hypervigilant, heavily surveyed, you know, vision of motherhood that products like Flow or Snoo or the Owlet monitor, the Nanit monitor, try to, you know, sell us on as like the peak of good motherhood is like paying all this attention. It seems like this antithesis is attractive to you. There's something in the free birther movement that attracts you to it. What, not that you're like joining, but that you're kind of like
interested by it. Yeah. When I was pregnant, my friend told me about an article that she had read that was about free birthers, which is like a term for people who strive to give birth with no medical intervention, no, like at home with no midwife, no doula, generally, because doulas are considered like a part of the medical system, an arm of the medical system. And so just them and maybe a partner or a family member there to like cut the cord or whatever afterwards.
A wolf just to chew it.
Exactly, a midwolf. There's like a woman who had something that she called a midwolf. It was like her dog who was there. Yeah, and yeah, she called it that.
Oh God, I was joking.
No, yeah, I know, it's so intense. And like, to be clear, like many of these people end up calling an ambulance or going to the hospital at some point during labor or after the birth, because like the placenta won't come out or whatever. So it's not as if they will never ever contact, you know, medical care, whatever. But I became really interested in them after my pregnancy became complex, because my pregnancy became so, and this is the, I don't know if this comes from like Foucault or from like free birthers, but it became very medicalized. I was going to the hospital very frequently when I was pregnant. And then after my son was born, you know, he was also like then immediately a part of this medical system. And I was also, you know, a part of this technological system that you mentioned, which is like, you know, can you control your baby by like strapping him into a crib that not only helps shake him to sleep essentially, but also like provides you stats about like how he's sleeping.
This is the Snoo.
The Snoo.
Yes.
The Snoo upside down U is, it was like giving me, we used a Snoo with our second, and I tell everyone to get a Snoo, and it's like messed up. I don't know.
People have very sort of like different experiences with the Snoo, and actually with my second baby, he slept completely like well in the Snoo. But with my first, he was not like a what you call a good sleeper, as if like there's like a good and bad way to just like, you know, be a newborn.
Binary. But I just have to add, Harvey Karp, the creator of the Snoo, his people have reached out to us to come on the pod. I'm like, maybe we should, interrogate.
I freaking love the Snoo, and I'm a 5S's person. The 5S is like watching Happiest Baby on the Block when Griffin was like 3 days old made me feel something.
Yeah.
Nothing helped for me, but like learning equanimity, but meditation. Anyway,
I ended up using it a second time, and then I like gave it to my friends. So I don't know if that's an endorsement or not, but the reason that I bring it up is that I found the free birthers to be this interesting mirror to that style of optimized pregnancy, where free birth itself is its own attempt to exert like extreme control. Mm-hmm. You're just doing it yourself. It's all about sort of like priming and purifying your body in order to have like a pregnancy that, they believe or claim like requires no medical intervention because like you've done it so well. Mm-hmm. And so I was interested in, I'm more likely to be marketed to by like the SNU and to be drawn into something like that. But I was interested in those parallel visions of like taking care of kids and pregnancy. Yeah. So that's what drew me into them. And also their podcast is, on their podcast, people tell their stories of free birth and they get more and more remote locations, like their
your journey to the free birth, to like the free birth conference is like, yes. I don't know, a Paul Thomas Anderson movie. It was like, was so
thank you for saying it, because as you know, like I talk about Phantom Thread like on the first page of my book.
No, it's definitely, it's like a version of The Master. And yeah, I mean, it was like thrilling to read, as well as I just have to say, like, you going back and revisiting the notes that the doctors made during your birth was like the most thrilling, mystery novel. I guess it's fact. I've read in a long time. It read like, I literally wrote like, what? Anyway, so I highly recommend that passage.
Oh my gosh.
Well, so to circle back to the free birthers, in this political moment, I'm thinking a lot about like the Maha mothers, the kind of trad wife, whatever. And I think that you mentioned the mirror, like, I think you do a really good job of tracing this very fine line between what's attractive about what these people are putting out there and then what very quickly becomes like insidious and problematic. And I think that there's these overlapping cultural circles, like, it's just this fine line between people who casually shop at like a crystal store and then who like don't vaccinate their kids. Like I can go to a crystal store and look around, things. But I vaccinate my kids, but you're like this, I don't know. I have found myself in that kind of like tumbling towards something and then backing way away. Like, oh, whoa.
Well, there's something compelling about free birth. It's sure, like it's compelling. I think that's why, Amanda, why you got into it, right? Because like you had a shitty experience with the medical establishment in some ways. In other ways, it was really great and helpful. And, but so it's...
I'm just interested in that push pull, and kind of, and it circles back to like when you decide to leave the free birther gathering.
Spoiler.
Right. I mean, yeah, I would think like for myself, I had a C-section the first time, which I think, in the free birth and like some parts of the wider natural birth community is like the worst thing, the worst outcome, which for me, it wasn't. But even so, and even though, I reported directly back to my OB the second that I was pregnant a second time, I realized during that second pregnancy that I really wanted to have a vaginal birth, and I became sort of convinced that like the reason that I had not had a vaginal birth the first time was like maybe I didn't push hard enough. Like maybe I didn't do like maybe there was some effort problem on my part, or it was like the epidural or whatever. I still had an epidural the second time. And so, even for me, like someone who's very bought into this medical system, like I could feel the impacts of this movement on me that was like, you're not really achieving something unless you're like pushing a baby out. You know what I mean? And which surprised me. I mean, so much about this surprised me. And I think that's also something that pushed me toward the internet, where it's like when I first started using my period app to track my fertility to try to get pregnant, like I became really kind of like nervous about if it would work, like really how easy or difficult it would be to become pregnant. And I got fixated on it in a way that like I wouldn't want to talk to my friends about. In the same way that like, your friend who like is always talking to you about their diet or whatever, like it's so boring.
Their cat, that's me.
Yeah. And it's like, well, I don't want to like align my actual identity with these thoughts, but they're still there. And so I ended up, exploring these things that I was ashamed of or I didn't want to own in that forum instead. And so I think a lot of things can get subverted into there.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, you also, one of the themes I love so much in your book, Amanda, that we talk about a lot here is this kind of this tendency of our society to suggest individual solutions to systemic problems. And you talk about free birth as like the ultimate triumph of the individual, right? Like you don't need anyone and you're just alone in the woods and you fucking did it. But then also how the technologies support that too, right? Like if you just get the information, you will be able to kind of conquer all of this. And that most of the challenges, even like a baby sleeping, right, actually have systemic solutions and exacerbators, right? Like babies are going to sleep how they sleep. If we lived in more mutualistic society and, if we lived with our families, that would be better, right? We would have people who would help take care of the babies. But instead, we just kind of keep pushing this individual button, getting, these technologies that would solve it for one person, but end up kind of falling flat.
And I think a lot of these technologies are like savvily selling themselves as your technological village or whatever, because they know that so much of American parenting, at least, is isolated. But I think they're also like pushing it a little further, where they're saying like, aren't your in-laws so annoying? Like, aren't your parents annoying when they try to tell you what to do? Because you know better, like you're the mom or whatever. And so it's also this messaging that's like, even if you have help, like you really shouldn't trust that because it's all about you. Your singular control over this situation. And like it can be very convincing because like people are annoying. Other people are annoying. Like it's just that is true. But ultimately, like, is that a reason to completely organize our society this way? Like I don't really think so.
Well, and is it a marketing strategy? It is, it's like if you can't rely on anyone, that's you end up having to, ship out for things, essentially, like I've talked about how my I have like a grocery swap with a friend and we go to like 2 very different grocery stores on different days each week and we buy each other's groceries. And like it's one of the reasons that I don't have to use Amazon and Whole Foods and kind of the, delivery services and all of that. 'Cause I'm relying on other people, but it's really hard. It's like just one little specific way. There's so much kind of convincing me that the smart thing to do is to find like a hack that I can pay for or that I can download something for.
Right. It's certainly easier, if you have like a little extra money or you want to go into credit card debt.
Yes, well, which they're also happy to have you do.
And like your point, Amanda, about not wanting to own parts of yourself. Like, you have these curiosities, you have these questions, you have these fears, and some of them are less attractive. And so we take them to the internet instead of to our friends. And that is a way of maintaining disconnection because I think that if we went to other women and shared our worst parts of ourselves, usually, at least one of your friends is going to go like, oh, me too. you know,
Yeah,
absolutely.
right,
And that
right.
in that moment is so connecting. I mean, I think quick little conversations on the playground when I just spit something out that's not attractive about myself to another parent, those are my best, like, little bonding moments.
Yeah, I mean, I think writing this book, you know, after I wrote the book, I was like, what if this is one of those books that just falls off the shipping container and it sinks to the bottom of the ocean? Like, wouldn't that be great? You know, nobody would have to read it. And I like literally, I couldn't imagine anyone reading it, or I would imagine someone reading it and being like, this woman has obsessive compulsive disorder. And, you know, I guess she wrote a book about it. And so... But you know, just like hearing from early readers that there are things that they connect with is like, you know, it's like, actually, you're not such a special little gremlin, you know, like other people are, you know, dealing with some of the same things that you are.
Oh, I think actually you're quite a every woman in this book, Amanda.
It's very relatable.
Like, I don't, I think there's lots of moments where you don't seem like you naturally are tending towards anxiety, right? I mean, we have some really valuable motherhood confessions about how anxious moms are. And it's not that you're not anxious, but like, I really see you in this book as kind of just like a stock character being placed in the context of all of these systems.
Well, and you write with a lot of empathy, I think, for which I really appreciated, because you're coming at it from your own, you're being very vulnerable with your own story. And so it feels, even for the free birthers, like, or anyone, you know, it feels that there's a lot of empathy in this book for the people who are living and navigating millennial parenthood and late capitalism. Like, that
yeah,
feels...
I mean, I found, like, if I get really interested in a subculture, it's because I feel implicated by it in some way. So there's something about the, like, trad wives, which is just like a little bit of a step too far, where like I'm not going to be watching that content because I'm like, I just don't feel implicated enough in what they're doing. But even with them and with all of these other, you know, cultures, mothering cultures that like I don't identify with, there is a part of me that is vulnerable to what they're selling. And there's a big part of me that like benefits from this structure that they're working in. So just this idea that, you know, a white mother's job is to have kids and to like have this like pure experience where you create a normal or ideally like a superior child. That is, you know, just lurking beneath some of these natural childbirth movements. I had a version of that was in my head when I was pregnant. You know, that was like, what did you ingest that caused this? Like, what bath did you take? Like, when you had a fever, when you were 6 weeks pregnant, like, why didn't you go out of the hotel room that you were in and like find a CVS that was open so you could take something to take your fever down? So whether or not like I decide to invest more in a community like that or to actually like model my external behavior around it, it's like it's affecting me in some way.
Yeah. I mean, I think, yes, on all of those levels, the book is deeply relatable, I think, to just about every mom in America right now. So I want to ask you for your culture recommendations. We always do that at the end. So it can be books, movies, things you're reading or watching with your kids. Anything that you're excited about right now, other than obviously your own book, which I'm sure.
Well, she doesn't sound that excited though. She's have you?
Well, you just read it. You just read it out
what's going to happen is before it comes out, you're just alone with your own anxiety and your wish that you can take it back. But it's like you're about to get excited. It's happening.
Right.
It's kind of like pregnancy.
Yeah, it's interesting.
There you go.
Like, yeah, it's happening. Like now it is something that like I can't change and it's just happening to me and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, there was a great piece. Our buddy, Catherine Jesser-Morton wrote about it in The Cut. And you must be getting some excitement.
I love talking to her. Yeah.
Yes.
She's too smart.
She is so smart.
Yeah.
I feel like there was a period when I was like when I was writing my book where I was like, I can't read other books because they just feel wrong. Like I don't want my book to be like them. And then there was a period like as I was finishing my book where I was like, I love every book. I can't believe people write books. It's so hard. Like I'm so amazed by them. And I feel like I'm finally like regaining my like just like a normal critical perspective on writing. And I'm really enjoying Sophie Gilbert's new book, Girl on Girl, that's coming out at the end of April, which is about the pop culture of the early 2000s and how it pitted women against themselves and each other. Ooh. And how that decade like reverberates in our own time. And it's just so, it's one of those things like, it's one of those books that I read it and I was like really jealous of it because she does all of this stuff that I can't do, or maybe I shouldn't try to do, but she's just so rigorous in her research and she finds all of these gems from that period. But still she manages to synthesize them into this critical perspective. And it's just really good. And it's made me more empathetic about like my middle school self, my high school self that lived through that stuff.
Oh my gosh. Sold. Yeah. Amanda, I have a stupid question.
Okay.
In the book, you mentioned that sometimes when you interview famous people, you take like a lorazepam before.
Yeah.
And so I was like, did you take a lorazepam before you talked to Parker Posey?
Oh my God!
Because I just think that would
you
be
have
so
to say lorazepam. I can't do it.
I can't even do it.
Where's my lorazepam?
Oh my God!
My God!
I just am enjoying her so much.
Yeah. So
you don't have to say if you don't want to.
No, it's okay.
Personal.
In the book, I talk about taking like I would call it a lorazepam if I knew that it was going to be like a weird cultural touchstone now, but the Ativan is like the brand name. I would take a pill before interviewing a celebrity because I would get quite nervous about
take it before
meeting
flying.
them. Yeah.
Same. Yeah. Who doesn't?
Right. But I took one before interviewing Sarah Jessica Parker during my pregnancy, and then she was like so nice. She's like so nice, the nicest possible person you could meet, and so I felt stupid about it. But then it became an issue once like the medical system was like trying to diagnose like my son's condition and to figure out what may have caused it, whether it was environmental or genetic. And so recently I profiled Parker Posey, who in The White Lotus plays a woman who has a lorazepam addiction. And actually I asked her if she had ever taken it before, and she was like, "Oh, no." And I was like, "Oh, okay, I've taken it
like same
1,000 times." But actually, no, I didn't. And I don't always, I don't write as many profiles as I used to, but it may have been the first time that I didn't. And I've just realized that like I don't need to anymore. Which even like is? Yeah, I think honestly having kids has made me a lot more comfortable with myself. Like I don't know, I really felt like after my kids were born, just like seeing myself in them, like they're so adorable, and like the things about myself that I dislike, I'm like, oh, it's so cute when they do it. And also like I was like I just have to get right with myself because I'm gonna see myself in them all the time. And also they make me a more extroverted person for sure. Like I have to be just like constantly talking. Like they're asking me questions, I'm asking them questions, I'm talking to a bunch of strangers in order to like facilitate their education and their life. And so, yeah, I think that has helped me.
That's so funny. I think about how my kids make me more force me to be more introverted.
I mean, it's true that like I'm stuck in my house a lot.
I couldn't be less introverted just naturally. But like, yeah, I have one kid who's definitely an introvert who's like, can you just shut the fuck up?
I'm sure that's coming at some point.
No, it's good. They balance us out. It's like wherever we need to kind of move a little bit. Yeah.
I like the idea that you do. I think it's hard, you don't want to be like really full of self-hatred if your kids love you. You can kind of see yourself in a different light. You're like, wow, they really like me a lot,
I know. Yeah. It's like, oh, the most beautiful child on earth, like thinks that I loves me. Like,
right.
It's very affirming. But also my kids are really young. So I'm like just waiting for them to be like, I hate you. Yeah. I mean, one of my kids has started calling me nasty mommy. Nasty mommy. Like if I do something that
with like a British accent.
I don't know where he got that.
Nasty mommy.
It's like a Hillary Clinton
weird episode of Peppa Pig.
Maybe. I know. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Whenever I deny him something, I become nasty mommy.
You're a nasty mommy.
I know.
I'd like to get some drinks with this nasty mommy.
Yeah, exactly.
You say that's mama to you.
All right. Well, Amanda, thank you so much for this beautiful book and this lovely conversation.
Thank you so much. You've helped me really understand some things about the book that I'm, still struggling to articulate. So thank you.
Please buy Amanda's book. Yeah. You will not be sorry. We'll put a link in our show notes.
Season is coming up.
Oh, yeah. Beach season is coming up. And I see, because I'm such an extrovert, I will read a book like this on the beach and be like, I hope somebody asks me what this book is about. Thanks for listening to The Mother of It All. And like my mom always said, I don't know, Google it. The Mother of It All is produced by Opus Knox Media with music from It's Electric. If you liked this episode, why not send it to a friend right now? Go on, we'll wait. You can follow us on Substack at themotherofitall.substack.com, where subscribing will get you episodes and bonus posts in your inbox and connect you with the Mother of It All listener community. Plus, become a paid subscriber and get a hot off the presses Mother of It All canvas tote. We're also on Instagram at The Mother of It All, and you can email us anytime with ideas or feedback at motherculturepod@gmail.com.